I'm 95 years old. I've been alone in this house for 22 years. I had a wife of 48 years, 3 children, and a best friend who lived 40 feet from my front door. And I lost every single one of them because I kept a secret that wasn't mine to tell. What I'm about to tell you is a story about a man who watched me lose everything he caused, a woman who blamed me for what she did, and a daughter who still doesn't know the truth about who she is. Evelyn and I got married in September of 1955 at the Lutheran Church on Peach Street in Erie, Pennsylvania. I was 25, she was 22, and I thought I was the luckiest man in the state. We bought this house on Garfield Avenue the following spring, $8,200, which was every dollar we had, and then some. And we started building a life. Thomas came in 58, Patricia in 60, and Lily in 64. 3 children in a house that was always a little too small, but never felt cramped because it was full in the right way, full of noise and shoes by the door and cereal bowls in the sink and all the things you don't appreciate until they're gone. I worked at General Electric on East Lake Road for 37 years, machinist work, good honest work, and I was proud of that. I was proud of the house, the marriage, the whole thing. Pride. Pride is what makes you think the floor under you is concrete when it's really just paper somebody painted gray. George Brennan moved in next door in 1960 with his wife, Dorothy. He was one of those men who becomes your friend before you even realize it's happening. Showed up with a wrench when my sink was leaking, helped me carry the Christmas tree every December, sat on my porch and drank a beer and talked about the Pirates for 2 hours on a Saturday afternoon like neither of us had anywhere else to be. Our kids grew up together. Our wives cooked together on holidays. For 22 years, George Brennan was the closest thing I had to a brother. But here's something I figured out at 95 years old. The people who are closest to you aren't always close because they love you. Sometimes they're close because it's the best position to take what's yours. March 17th, 1982. I remember the date because it was the day my daughter Lily got into a car accident on West 26th Street. She was 17, a senior at McDowell High, and a pickup truck ran a stop sign and hit the passenger side of her car. They brought her into Hamot Medical Center with internal bleeding. The doctor came out and told us she needed a blood transfusion. I rolled up my sleeve without thinking. I would have given that girl every drop I had. The nurse took my blood, ran the typing, and came back with a look on her face that I'll never forget as long as I live. She said, "Mr. Caldwell, your blood type is A positive. Your daughter is O negative. You cannot be her biological father." And by the way, I want to thank this channel for giving people like us a voice. Don't forget to subscribe. It's free. Like the video and share your thoughts and stories down in the comments. I stood in that hallway. The fluorescent lights were buzzing. Someone's TV was on down the hall, playing some game show with the audience laughing. And I felt something inside me just, go quiet. Like a motor that had been running for 48 years just stopped. I was still standing, but everything inside me had sat down. Lily got her transfusion from the blood bank. She recovered in 2 weeks. She was fine, but I was not fine. I drove home that night and Evelyn was sitting at the kitchen table and I sat down across from her and I said 5 words. Who is Lily's father? She didn't flinch. That's the part that still burns me 43 years later. She didn't gasp, didn't cry, didn't say, "What are you talking about?" She just looked at me like she'd been rehearsing for this conversation for 17 years and was almost relieved it was finally happening. Then she said one word, "George." 22 years of friendship, 40 feet between our front doors, birthday parties and Thanksgiving dinners and Sunday cookouts, and him sitting at my table eating food I paid for, and he's the father of my youngest child, George. But finding out about George and Evelyn isn't what destroyed my family. It was the wound, yes. But what Evelyn did in the 3 days after that kitchen table conversation is what burned my life to the ground. Because she didn't just betray me, she erased me. I told Evelyn I needed time to think. I wasn't making any decisions at that table on the worst night of my life. I needed to figure out what to do about Lily because Lily was my daughter. I don't care what a blood test says. I held that girl the day she was born. I taught her to ride a bicycle on this sidewalk right outside. I walked her to school on her first day of kindergarten. She was mine, but I didn't know how to carry what I now knew, and I didn't know if I should tell her because telling her meant destroying who she thought she was. So I asked for 3 days. Evelyn took those same 3 days and did something I will never forgive her for as long as I live, which at 95 will not be very long, but the anger will last every minute of it. She called Thomas, she called Patricia, she sat them down separately, and she told them that I had been having an affair, that I had been unfaithful for years. She cried. She played the victim. She told my children their father was a cheater and that she had been suffering in silence to keep the family together. My son Thomas called me on a Thursday evening. His voice was like ice. He said, "Mom told us everything." I said, "What exactly did she tell you, Thomas?" He said, "Don't do that, Dad. Don't play dumb. She told us about your affair." I stood in this kitchen holding the phone, and I understood exactly what she had done. She'd gotten ahead of me. She told them her version first so that anything I said afterward would sound like a guilty man making excuses. And the thing Evelyn understood, the thing she counted on, is that children believe their mother, especially when their mother is crying. I could have told Thomas the truth right there. I had the words in my mouth. Lily isn't mine. Your mother and George. All of it. But the truth included Lily. And Lily was 17 years old, and she'd just gotten out of a hospital bed, and she didn't know any of this. And telling Thomas and Patricia meant it would reach her. I was not going to let my daughter find out she wasn't mine through her brother's anger. So I said nothing. I said nothing, and I let my children believe I was the villain because the alternative was destroying their sister. And you know where George was during all of this? George was 40 feet away, mowing his lawn on Saturday mornings like nothing had happened, waving at me from his driveway. He watched Thomas's car stop showing up. He watched Patricia walk past this house without turning her head. He saw me become a ghost in my own family, and he knew exactly why, because he was the reason, and he waved at me. Patricia came to see me once after that, maybe 3 months later. She stood in this living room and she said, "Dad, I'm not going to pretend I understand what you did to Mom, but I'll still see you if you admit it and apologize." I said, "I have nothing to admit." She looked at me like I was like I was something stuck to her shoe. She shook her head and she walked out that front door. That was 1982. She was 22 years old. She's 65 now. I don't think she stepped inside this house since. That's 43 years. That's 15,695 days since my daughter stood in my living room and asked me to confess to something her mother did. Thomas moved to Columbus after that, then Virginia. He stopped calling altogether, changed his number at some point. I know because I tried it in 1991 and a stranger answered. Lily was the one that hurt most, and she didn't even know she was hurting me. She was 17. She didn't understand what was going on between her parents and her siblings. She just knew that suddenly there was a Cold War in her family, and her mother was crying a lot, and she stayed close to Evelyn. Of course she did. When things fall apart, children go to the parent who's crying, not the one standing still. That's just how it works. Doesn't matter who deserves it. Evelyn and I stayed married. I know that sounds insane. But I wasn't going to leave this house and give George Brennan the chance to sit at my kitchen table as some kind of stepfather to my children. And I wasn't going to file for divorce and have lawyers and courts and depositions and risk every secret about Lily coming out in paperwork some clerk could read. So I stayed. We slept in separate rooms for 21 years. We ate dinner at the same table and passed the salt and said nothing that mattered. She lived her life, I lived mine, and the house held us like a box holds two things that don't belong together. Evelyn died on November 2nd, 2003. Stroke. She was 70 years old. I sat in the hospital room and I held her hand because that is what you do when someone is dying. Even someone who took everything from you, even someone who lied to every person you love and let you carry the blame for 21 years. You hold their hand. I still don't know if that makes me a good man or a fool. Honestly, at this point, I don't think the difference matters much. After Evelyn passed, it was just me, this house, Garfield Avenue. George was still next door with Dorothy. He'd come out to get his mail, and I'd be getting mine, and we'd stand 15 feet apart, and he'd nod at me, and I'd nod back, and neither of us said a word about anything that mattered. 22 years of that after Evelyn died. Two old men standing in their driveways pretending there wasn't a grenade buried between them. Thomas never called. Patricia never came. Lily called every other Sunday from Buffalo, 10 minutes, weather and groceries, and "I love you, Dad," and she had no idea that those 3 words were the only thing keeping me in this house instead of in the ground. George died 5 weeks ago. Pancreatic cancer. Went fast. And 3 weeks after the funeral, Dorothy Brennan knocked on my front door holding a shoebox, and her hands were shaking. She sat down at my kitchen table. Everyone confesses at this table eventually. It's like some kind of, like a church pew with a coffee maker. And she opened the box. Letters. Dozens of them. Evelyn to George, George to Evelyn, going back to 1963. Love letters, arguments, plans, and photographs. One photograph of George holding Lily as a baby in a room I've never seen. Dorothy was crying. She said, "Walter, I didn't know. 40 years married to that man, and I didn't know." I believed her because I lived with Evelyn for 48 years, and I didn't know either. Some people are just better at hiding than the rest of us are at looking. She asked what I wanted to do with the letters. I said, "Send them to Thomas and Patricia." She said, "What about Lily?" I went quiet for a long time. Then I said, "Not yet. I'm not ready for that yet." Patricia called first. 4 days after Dorothy mailed the letters. She was crying before I even finished saying hello. She said, "Daddy." Just that one word, Daddy. She hadn't called me that since 1982. She said, "I stood in your living room. I told you to admit it. I told you to apologize for something that Mom did." I said, "You were 22 years old, Patricia. You believed your mother. That's what children do." She said, "Why didn't you tell us?" I said, "Because telling you the truth meant telling you about Lily, and I was not going to do that to your sister." She went quiet, then very softly, "You gave up all of us to protect her." I said, "Yes." She said, "And George just..." I said, "George waved at me from his driveway for 40 years. Yes." Thomas drove in from Virginia the following weekend. He's 67 years old now. He walked through my front door and stood in this living room and looked around like a man visiting a place he used to live in a dream. He sat down. He didn't say anything for a very long time. Then he said, I wasted 43 years being angry at the wrong person." I said, "You didn't waste them, Thomas. You were lied to." He said, "I should have asked you. I should have just asked you." Maybe he should have, but I understand why he didn't. Lily doesn't know. She's 61 years old, lives in Buffalo, teaches 2nd grade, calls me every other Sunday. She calls me Dad. And that word coming out of her mouth is the only thing in my entire life that isn't broken. I don't know if I'll ever tell her. Maybe she deserves the truth. Thomas and Patricia think she does. But I am 95 years old, and I have been protecting that girl since the day she was born, and I don't know if I know how to stop. Maybe that's selfish. Maybe I'm holding on to something that isn't mine to hold. But she calls me Dad, and I cannot be the one to take that away from her. I've lost enough. Patricia came last Sunday, first time inside this house in 43 years. She sat at the kitchen table, same chair her mother sat in the night she said George's name. She held my hand. She didn't let go for an hour, and for the first time in longer than I can count, I am not the villain of this family. I'm not the cheater. I'm not the man who ruined his marriage. I'm just Dad, and I have been waiting 43 years to be that again.